His organs are twisting until they pierce through his skin like sharp thorns. He screams in pure agony, begging to know what the old man just fed him. But his so-called master just smiles and tells him to get used to the suffering. This toxic queen ant egg was supposed to be a death sentence, but instead, it forcibly purifies his body and triples his mana. But before he was surviving lethal training from a psychotic hidden master, he was just another victim of the city. In a world where the strong take everything, our MC spent his entire life just trying to keep his head above water. He's finally reaching the end of a very short rope, gasping for air while even his life is stripped away. A massive maw opens in the earth to swallow him whole, dragging him into the dark along with the ruins of the city. Apparently, the only rule in this place is that the weak don't get to survive. A century ago, a single beam of light struck the world and changed everything forever. It acted like a hungry force, swallowing every living thing it touched, until the blue planet was gone. Now, humanity's only hope is to hide inside crowded steel fortresses. And this young man wonders why the light didn't just finish the job instead of leaving the worst people behind to rot. The bus ride is shattered when a massive arm slams Zeon into his seat, but the scarred man responsible just grins and pretends his hand slipped while he towers over his victim to demand a name. Zeon doesn't flinch as he finally gives them a target. Inside the transport, a scarred thug tries to act friendly, throwing an arm around Zeon while guessing what kind of crime landed a kid like him in a cage, assuming everyone on the bus is a criminal and casually listing off assault and theft, until Zeon catches the man off guard with a strike. He looms over the fallen thug with a look that ends the conversation, offering to tell him exactly why he was caught, and the answer is murder. The truth lands with enough weight to silence the entire transport, making the thug's jokes feel small because to Zeon, he didn't even kill a person. In Neo Soul, you aren't considered human unless you have the power to back it up, so he didn't feel a bit of regret for the life he took. In this world, there is a clear line between the powerful and the divine, and crossing it is a death sentence. Our protagonist learned that lesson the hard way. To Zeon, this was supposed to be just another piece of trash being added to the dump. He didn't think twice about the dying thief until the man used his last breath to drop a name that makes the world stop. Lee Jiryong. The panic replaces Zeon's cold pride as the realization finally sinks in. If powerful men are just people, then awakeners like Jiryong are the gods standing far above them. The weight of the mistake hits him, and his composure breaks, forcing the protagonist to flee the city on the first bus bound for the mines. Our protagonist's mind struggles to catch up while the thug mocks his effort, wondering if this is really where it all ends. The panic over his broken hand barely has time to set in before he is launched through the air to slams into the floor, an impact that pulls a ragged scream from his lungs. Zeon simply wasn't ready for this level of power, but the threat doesn't matter as much as the fact that our protagonist failed. He fled here to escape the reach of awakeners. Now, he's trapped by the very thing he always ran from. The thug shows off his power until a sudden jolt throws everyone from their seats that leaves the passengers bloodied and shouting for answers. Slumped over the steering wheel, the driver stares out into the glare and whispers that they've finally reached it. Behind him, a passenger snaps at the man to shut up before the view stops him cold. The driver is far gone, muttering about the mines while the passenger feels his anger turn into a dawning horror. Realizing the end is actually here, Zeon claws at the shifting sand, but there's no grip to be found in the mouth of a monster. He's been down this road before, back in the alleys of Neo Soul, where he learned a hard lesson about awakeners and the food chain. Even being swallowed whole doesn't feel like a surprise anymore, just another day where the world wins and he loses. The fading light brings a bitter kind of peace. He spent his whole life preparing for this logic to catch up with him. As the maw closes and his hand reaches for a sky he can't see, he lands on the only truth that matters. In this world, the weak don't get to choose how they go. Zeon thinks his own death is boring. He spent his last moments wishing he was stronger, but the silence of the pit doesn't last as those final regrets turn into a desperate need to survive. The void was supposed to be final. Instead, Something pulls him back while the ground begins to swirl and shift. The realization hits him like a physical shock, and he jolts back to life with a gasp, refusing to let this be the end. Zeon gasps for air, clutching his chest as the pressure inside him finally breaks, giving way to a surge of raw energy that maps out his veins and forces him to see a world he wasn't ready for. The darkness dissolves into a scorched desert where the ruins of a lost age sit half buried in the dust. He stares at the horizon, the weight of the realization finally landing. Paris lies broken in the sand, the Eiffel Tower shattered under the shadow of a massive tower that rises over the ruins of the city. Zeon can't look away as his heart hammers against his ribs. Below him, the world he once knew has shattered into a floating graveyard of stone and falling water, and every struggling breath makes the weight of the view feel like it might crush him. This is what remains of his home, a lonely sphere drifting through space while surrounded by a field of its own broken pieces. These debris fields stretch out into the dark, marking the absolute end of everything. Zeon looks out at the ruin of the world, focusing his strength into one last strike to tear through the beast blocking his path. He is going to survive. Even when everything else falls apart, he refuses to let the abyss take him. In a place where every memory has turned to dust, he is down bad, but he is far from out, and he just turns his back on the wreckage to start walking. This is his new life now, no matter what it takes. Zeon is pushed right to the edge, but he has too much left to lose to just give up now, and looking out over the ruins, he makes a vow to himself that he's going to make it out of this alive. This is the part where he stops running and starts fighting back. Zeon feels a change that rewrites everything he knows about his own body, and the realization lands that he's finally awakening. This is the threshold where he stops being a victim and starts being a threat. A massive worm bursts from the sand to meet him, but he only dares the monster to come closer, no longer seeing it as a predator. He fixes his gaze on the target and launches into the air for the kill. Zeon takes a direct hit and slams into the dirt, then coughs up sand and tries to find his footing as he realizes the stranger's speed is on a different level, and weighs a move back to the first floor before bringing his heel down to obliterate a giant worm. The gap in their power is already obvious. Seeing this kind of power hits Zeon hard, especially when Jang Yongbum kills a sandworm and acts like it was nothing, making him realize he's finally looking at a real awakened before Giselle suddenly appears. The awe is cut short when a sharp chill starts crawling up his arm. Yongbum treats the whole fight like just another chore. He locks his gaze on the boy with a look that feels like he's sizing him up, while Zeon struggles to ignore Giselle's teasing because of the freezing weight in his limb. Giselle dives in with a manic energy, snagging Zeon midair and tossing him around before slamming him into the dirt and turning the struggle into a game show about guessing his rank. The taunting stops cold the moment she checks his arm. She realizes right away that their prize might not be an awakened. Zeon screams in pain as she wrenches his arm back to show the bare skin, leaving the captain to face the impossible reality of a man without a rank insignia. Zeon is hanging on by a thread in the middle of a wasteland, but the crew that found him isn't interested in a rescue mission. The driver leans out of the armored window to bark orders, shouting that the group needs to move before the sun goes down. But Captain Jang Yongbum only takes a long, cold look at the kid, who meets that stare with a silent glare of his own. The captain makes a snap decision to toss him in the truck. The truck driver is reaching his breaking point, screaming at Jang Yongbum for his habit of charging into battles alone. His warnings about the coming sunset go ignored by Giselle and the rest of the crew, leaving the young man tied up in the back to observe his captors. He focuses on a small swirl of dust and watches it dance according to his will across the truck bed. Zeon has finally awakened an ability. It's the moment he's been waiting for, but gaining power while bound as a prisoner only raises the stakes. He studies the strange rank insignia appearing on his inner arm, realizing why the soldiers haven't noticed his rank yet, as his power has apparently taken on the very affinity of the desert. In this world, the rules are simple. Magic types are shown in blue, and physical heavy hitters are shown in red. There are rumors of rare exceptions, but Zeon holds a power that shouldn't exist: control over sand. The system gives him an F rank, the lowest possible grade. Surprisingly, the disappointment doesn't land. He's satisfied. Until this power truly becomes his, our protagonist will hide what he can do and endure. The world can think he's nothing for now, but he has already felt the scale of the power inside him, and it's as vast as the desert itself. Zeon has decided exactly what this world is to him, a stage, and he intends to own every inch of it. The journey begins at the Mana Crystal Mines, a jagged wasteland of stone and industrial grit that feels like a prison before he even steps inside. At first glance, the checkpoint seems normal, but he stays focused as the guards lead the prisoners toward the dark tunnels. A scarred soldier barks an order to move. He quickly threatens to silence the boy for even questioning his bound hands. Watching from the side, Giselle and Jang Yongbum track the new arrival. Jang can't shake his suspicion since Zeon is the only person to survive that transport, though Giselle is happy to laugh it off as luck. His instincts say otherwise. A fluke doesn't keep a man alive in a place like this. Jang Yongbum takes in the mess left behind at the crashes. That hole in the rock tells him everything he needs to know about the strength of his opponent. It goes against everything he knows about fighting. He has never seen force like this before. Back at the outpost, Zeon realizes he missed the chance to ask for a name, but he's already certain they are bound to meet again. Zeon's life just took a sharp turn into the deep dark. With his hands tied and a guard watching his every move, Zeon can't help but notice how much life is packed into these tunnels. It's a whole world down here, but the man guarding him is already losing his patience, barking at him to shut his mouth until the boss arrives. Zeon shrugs off the guard's insult and wanders through the market until the smell of meat draws him to a food stall, but he stops when something on the wall catches his eye, a poster claiming that hard work is what really lights up the city. The stall owner watches him look at it and rests his scarred hands on the counter while agreeing that the idea is laughable since the city is supposed to run on mana crystals. Zeon doesn't understand what else could possibly provide that much power until the old man points a finger right at his chest and gives him a one-word answer: you. The realization lands hard. The city doesn't just use its people for work, it uses them as fuel. This old man doesn't just sell skewers, he sells a look at the grave you're about to dig. The stall owner compares men like Zeon to rats that exist only to be used as fuel before noting that most of the boy's peers are likely already dead, which catches Zeon off guard as he tries to say he only came here for the money. The old man just laughs and points to the shadows where rows of dusty boxes sit as Zeon asks why any of this trash matters. These are the final remains of everyone who ever came here. It is a collection built one life at a time, and it's a look at the exact future waiting for the boy. In the slums, everyone resists the mana crystal mines at first because they're terrified of dying in the dark. They sell everything they own, and even their own lives just to avoid what's coming. But stalling never changes the result. Since trash only leaves trash behind, the stall owner is curious to see what Zeon will leave in the dirt when his time finally comes. And though the price for meat is high, that's just the cost of survival here. Zeon tries to laugh his way out of the bill by mocking the meat and calling out the 10 soul price as an obvious scam, but he eventually drops the act with a blunt refusal to pay. The mood shifts the second the words land as he realizes he's pushed his luck a step too far. The old man behind the counter finally speaks up, asking Zeon if he really thought a normal shop could operate this openly in a place like the mines. A dozen blades catch the light as the crowd closes in, while the owner waits to see what our protagonist will do now that the trap is shut. Zeon slams his fist onto the table, desperately trying to talk down the food stall owner because 10 sol for a single meal is an impossible price. But the old man isn't actually looking for cash. Instead, his smile turns sharp as he names the trade he really wants: the mana crystal tucked away in the boy's pocket. The realization hits hard. If a simple stall owner knows about the stone, the secret Zeon's been guarding is already out on the streets. The man demands he hand it over immediately, and for a second, defiance hits as Zeon thinks of everything he's suffered to protect that crystal. But his bravery dies the moment a massive hand clamps down on his head and forces him back into a terrified plea for credit. The thug decides he's done talking and slams Zeon's head into the ground, shouting for his boss to let him bury the kid once and for all. Zeon responds with a blast of force that tears the man's arm clean off, forcing the onlookers to watch the limb hit the floor as the reality of the situation finally lands. Our MC rises from the dirt to stand over his opponent while the last of his mercy disappears. Zeon is lost in a vision that feels far too real until a sudden shout snaps him back and a heavy hand pulls his head up to face the scarred guard standing over him. The man asks if he was off in another world, but our lead knows that word doesn't even come close to the power of what just happened. He curses to himself and tries to settle his nerves. The weight of the vision still hangs in his mind, because it wasn't just a daze, it was a warning of what's coming. Zeon drops the prize on the counter, finally handing over the magic stone he went through hell to find. When the offer comes in at a mere 100 sol, Zeon's patience finally snaps. 300 was the absolute lowest he would go, and being cheated like this after everything he's done is more than he can swallow. The talk ends the second Zeon is slammed into the counter, a brutal reminder that in this outpost, power is the only currency that really matters. Zeon grips his hand until it shakes, fighting the urge to kill the man right in front of him, because it's not time to move yet, so he forces himself to ask for a little extra change to make up for the bad deal. The scavenger boss only laughs before offering to let him pick one single item from a shelf full of useless junk. Zeon sifts through the pile and finds nothing but scraps. He's looking at a kid who would rather look like a clown than take even a tiny loss. Zeon finally spots something worth a second look in the merchant's pile. Even though the scavenger dismisses the item as caravan junk, the protagonist knows an hourglass like this is his best bet and ignores the insults while settling the deal, stopping only to ask for the old man's name, before getting a loud, prideful answer that allows Zeon to leave with one final wish that they never have a reason to meet again. But Zeon is already checking the hourglass for the 10 minutes he has left, so he heads to the miner's quarters to settle onto the floor and even out his breathing, pulling his focus into a single point until the world goes quiet. The shift starts here. He grips the glass and gives the command, "Move." Zeon studies the strange hourglass, but the failed awakening leaves him exactly where he started. He's certain he's never seen it before, yet the feeling that it was prepared for him won't leave him, almost like it was calling his name from a place he can't remember. The quiet breaks when the door is kicked open by a man demanding to know why the new recruit isn't crawling toward the mines, and Zeon only offers a flat correction, noting that nobody actually gave him any directions. Zeon takes a heavy blow that sends him flying, landing just as Park Manho's fist shakes with a rage that's finally boiling over. He tells Zeon to shut his mouth and pins him down, unloading a wave of insults until the anger finally vanishes and he orders the boy to follow, leaving Zeon to pull himself up and clutch his bruised ribs as they reach the entrance to the Sector 3 mine, while the man starts listing every cost they'll deduct from his pay. Zeon interrupts to ask about the wages, but he's still waiting for an answer when the air shifts and a pickaxe slams into his head, shattering his helmet light while Manhwa looms over him, screaming that he'll learn by working, not by talking, until he's threatened with being sent in alone, finally forcing the man to lead the way. As they head into the dark, Manhwa yells one last promise. If they crawl back out without a magic stone, he'll finish the job himself. Deep in the earth, Zeon hears about a streak of bad luck involving a captain who just lost everything gambling. Apparently, these tunnels are a lawless hole filled with the same bad habits as the city above. Our MC mocks the captain's stupidity, earning a dark laugh from the older man before he starts acting weak, claiming his skin is too delicate for this kind of labor. The miner's response is a chilling omen, noting that nobody has ever been injured in the next shaft. They stop at shaft 972, a massive room carved into the deep rock. The reality of the trap lands as the only way out disappears, leaving him to face the silence of the tunnels alone. That shock soon turns into a screaming rage against the people who dumped him here just because of a bad mood. In a fit of helpless temper, he hurls his pickaxe into the shadows, and though he was too angry to notice it earlier, the air in this shaft is heavy with mana no normal human could survive. The pressure builds as he moves deeper, and he still can't figure out where all of this energy is coming from. A familiar shape breaks through the shadows. Leading him to the pickaxe, he starts to think his luck might finally be turning around, until the ground opens up and pulls him into a red surge, and suddenly his luck is the last thing on his mind. Zeon realizes too late that the floor is gone. He is being pulled into a port he never expected to see, losing his grip on his pickaxe as the ground finally catches him with the impacts. Life has always been a fight for the boy, starting the day his parents dumped him to rot in the city rain. Neighbors only hoped he wouldn't die on their doorsteps so they wouldn't have to deal with him. He spent those years pinned under the heels of men who beat him for stealing, clutching scraps of meat because he refused to go hungry. Zeon is running through the dark warehouse corridors and stops cold once he understands the weight of the body at his feet. It takes him a second, but he finally sees what he's done. He just killed a man. The hunters are right behind him, promising that his life ends right here. He bolts back into the shadows as they shout to break his legs if they have to, but his lungs are burning, and he finally admits that he only ever wanted a normal life. That dream dies the moment the boy's strength gives out and he hits the concrete. Zeon wakes up with a throbbing headache and a heavy wave of heat. The grit beneath his palm is rough, and the warmth rising from the floor isn't from the sun. It's coming from something much more dangerous. The fog in his mind finally clears as he remembers the portal and the fall, a mistake that just landed him in the middle of a disaster. Looking out over the rivers of fire, the truth finally lands. He's trapped in a volcanic dungeon. Zeon hits the ground hard, head spinning as he tries to make sense of the dust and the heat already beginning to sear his skin. The ground is like a furnace, making him realize he's really in a dungeon. He stares at the volcanic ash on his hand, knowing the air will scorch his lungs if he stays still, so he prepares to move and ties his mask tight, figuring every entrance has to have an exit somewhere. He's not dying here. He prepares for a sprint through the shortest route possible. He throws himself across the burning ground with a grit that refuses to let him give up, landing hard on a jagged ledge. The determination in his eyes turns to fear, and his prayer for a way out is lost the second he begins to fall toward the heat. Zeon lunges for the ledge, screaming at the heat just to keep his own panic at bay, then drags himself onto the cliff while he tries to catch his breath. The fear turns into a sharp, familiar spite as he screams a threat to the sky, promising Park Man-ho that he is a dead man once he escapes. He forces himself to stand, knowing that getting angry only makes the air feel hotter, and settles on a single goal. He will get back. This was only the first trial, and he still has 4 more to survive. Zeon calculates the distance left between him and solid ground, forcing himself to stop thinking and just keep his legs moving because he refuses to let his journey end in a place like this. So he launches himself into the air just as the ground itself wakes up and a massive worm surges out of the heat. The creature's jagged back breaks the surface right where he needs to land, and now his only target is the beast's rocky skin. And Zeon finds himself scrambling for any kind of grip. It's a mountain of scales and heat, and the temperature is high enough that the volcanic ash has started to melt and run down the creature's side. Zeon hangs on for dear life, struggling to breathe in air that feels like a furnace, until he realizes his power goes further than he thought, and he can actually control the volcanic ash too. This discovery is the only reason he's still alive, but survival in this heat is a whole different problem. Zeon hits the rocky floor hard, the breath knocked out of him as the heavy heat of the dungeon starts to sink in. This place is like an oven. The environment itself is proving to be a much bigger threat than any magic beast. Every breath feels like swallowing hot ash, searing his lungs until his vision starts to blur and his mind begins to slip. The thought finally hits him. He might actually die here. It's a quiet realization in a massive empty cave. For a second, the weight of death is the only thing he can feel, but he isn't ready to let go, and he forces his body to respond as his anger at the situation starts to burn. He only just promised himself he would survive. He won't go out before he's even had a chance to find a girlfriend or live a real life. He finds his footing through the haze. He stands his ground against the massive worm creature, straining every muscle just to stay on his feet, but he freezes when a familiar voice cuts through the air. He barely has time to process the shock before a figure drops from the shadows to land on the beast, revealing the sinister grin of Old Man Yama. The shock hits Zeon as Yama drops straight toward them out of the sky. The old man is leaning into the fall with a wild grin, enjoying the momentum of a descent meant to end in total destruction. Yama tightens his hold and drops straight for his target with a look of pure joy, but Zeon can only watch as he realizes his body won't move in time. The strike lands with the weight of a falling mountain, caving the earth in and sending a wave of stone to throw him back into the dark as he screams. The shockwave hits with enough force to burst Zeon's eardrums, leaving him in a silent world where he can only scan the area for a monster that isn't there anymore. Yama stands over the massive worm, having ended the fight before Zeon could even blink. And the boy realizes then that this isn't just a strong hunter. He's standing in front of a force that makes every rank he knew feel meaningless. This isn't just power. It's a level of existence he never thought was possible, cracking the scorched earth as Yama demands a name, and Zeon freezes while the pressure of the man's presence locks him into a 3-second ultimatum. Yama starts the countdown immediately, letting the silence stretch across the wasteland until the reflection of his frame fills Zeon's panicked eyes, and the giant looms over the kid to see if he's ready to die. Yama grows tired of waiting for an answer and decides to end the conversation. The threat works instantly, forcing Zeon to break his silence in a total panic as he throws his hands up and begs for mercy. Apparently, the boy isn't a mute after all, and the sudden outburst is enough to buy him a few more seconds of life. Gasping for air, the kid finally screams out the only answer that might save him. His name is Zeon. That settles only after the old man reveals his real name, Deoden. The power behind it hits Zeon like a physical strike, and while he demands to know why he's being treated like an enemy despite his gratitude, Yama ignores him to focus on a glowing rift in the ground. Apparently, the dungeon is so full of mana it has to vent the pressure through these cracks just to keep from tearing itself apart. Imagine seeing the world through energy rather than sight. Most people never encounter a mana snare in their entire lives, but Zeon is finding out exactly why they're so feared. This isn't just a trap, it's a living, breathing snare. Zeon is stuck in a snare, a trap that hunts for anything living, and a memory of Bakmanho laughing at his luck only makes the situation feel more desperate. But Yama cuts the tension by calling him an idiot. Before the boy can argue, the old man grabs him and demands he concentrate his mana until he can see through energy rather than sight. The perspective shifts, revealing a massive, fleshy trap hidden in the air. This isn't just dark energy, it's a living structure woven through the mana and waiting to snap shut. Zeon finally understands the terrifying scale of what he's dealing with, and it worked so well that Zeon never felt any danger even with the threat right in front of him. This makes twice now that the same stranger has saved his life. He finally asks for a name, only for Deoden to snap back that he's already told him once. Zeon demands to know who this man is and how they ended up here, and dares the boy to watch as he activates a power called Crayon. The cavern floor shatters under the force of the move, hitting Zeon with a pressure that nearly crushes him until the realization lands. This isn't magic, it's something else entirely. Zeon is finding out the hard way that his new teacher doesn't believe in safety nets. Though Deoden snaps the boy out of his shock with a shout, the old man makes it clear he isn't helping, telling the kid to prove his value by staying alive as Zeon is left to fend for himself against birds moving so fast he can barely track them or dodge without pure instinct. Zeon scrambles to keep his footing as the world turns into a blur of speed. These creatures are simply too fast to outrun. The swarm keeps focusing all their aggression on his left side. He braces against the strikes as they begin to add up, realizing that even his enhanced vision can't bridge the gap in speed. The reality of the situation finally lands. He's going to die. If he doesn't find a new gear right now, this desert is going to be his grave. But then he thinks of the old man who already saved him twice. And dying like an idiot after all that help is a fate he refuses to accept. Zeon is trapped in a fight he can't win. If he doesn't find a way to see his enemy now, he isn't making it off this field. Deoden is losing his patience, shouting into the silence, while Zeon stares up, struggling to even realize where he is. But Zeon can't hear clearly through the ringing in his ears. He realizes he is trapped in a corner. He begs his mind for a way to track an enemy that moves faster than his eyes can follow. Deiden decides to show the boy exactly why he's failing, and commands him to gather mana into his eyes to reach a level of focus he's never used before. Deiden's voice cuts through the chaos. He commands Zeon to start feeling the mana instead of trusting his eyes, and the kid tracks the heat of its magic pulsing through the ruins as he waits for the power to get close. He strikes only when the distance is shortest, and then the truth finally lands. The old man had foreseen everything, planning this entire fight long before it even started. Faced with a power that breaks every law he knows, the young man can only scream the one question that matters. What kind of monster is this old man? Deiden doesn't answer, already lost in a manic combat high he hasn't felt in years. He brings his blade down with enough force to shatter the canyon floor, and his expression twists as he begs for his opponent to do more than just survive. Imagine being so strong that a boss fight feels like a missed opportunity. For a man like Deiden, the biggest threat is actually getting bored. He isn't just fighting the beast, tearing through stone and scale until the giant monster lies broken at his feet, and as the dust settles, the old warrior only sighs, while Zeon watches from the sidelines with a weird sense of pity for the creatures that were supposed to be the hunters. Zeon laughs through the blood on his face, hoping the worst is over right before the air begins to vibrate with a new threat. A massive roar slams into him like a physical blow, forcing him to his knees as his body begins to give out, and he can barely ask what is happening between gasps for air. Deiden explains that every dungeon has a source. This massive monster is the only reason the old man came here in the first place. Zeon can barely keep his footing as the boss reveals itself, but Deiden only smiles like a man who found exactly what he wanted, while the Crimson Drake comes down into the room, causing Zeon to question what the creature actually is. The news of its rank forces him to do some terrifying math, because a monster of that level doesn't belong here. It means they're in a field. Deiden is surprised the kid knows anything about monster fields. But Zeon just sticks to the facts and explains how B-rank monsters develop human-like traits. It's a ranking system just like the ones awakened humans use, and a blue field like this one means they're dealing with a magic type, a creature so massive that Zeon can only scream as Deiden drives a strike through it. He watches the horizon break and realizes that all the knowledge he brought from his past life is meaningless now. He spent years learning the rules of the world, but none of that matters when he's standing next to a man who can move like this. The old man isn't just fighting, he's erasing the monster from the sky. The Crimson Drake lunges with enough force to shatter the stone, but Deiden meets the charge with a swing meant to level mountains, pouring every ounce of strength into the arc as the steel bites in. Even with a killing blast forming inches from his face, our lead doesn't pull back as the blade carves deep through the armor of the Drake's throat. He mocks the creature's agony and asks if the beast finally understands what it feels like to hurt, before promising to take that pain away for good. Sometimes the most dangerous place to be is exactly where you are. Deiden goes for the kill, promising to make this the dragon's final day, and the reality hits Zeon. He might be the one who doesn't survive. He screams for the monsters to just talk it out, but his voice is lost in the chaos as he scrambles for safety while the pressure buckles the air itself. A roar of agony rips through the battlefield, pinning the kid down as his boots skid across the broken dirt until he is just fighting to stay alive through the collateral damage. To him, this fight is just a game, and he taunts the Crimson Drake like they're kids on a playground while the earth breaks around them. The powers collide with enough force to shake the entire canyon, throwing a massive shockwave toward the boy watching from the sidelines. Zeon stands frozen as the cliffs collapse. The scale of the power here is beyond anything he can match, and he can only curse his own weakness. But then the ledge gives way. The ground beneath his feet vanishes, and Zeon falls straight into the dark. The ground is gone before Zeon even feels the shift. He braces for an impact that never comes, only to find himself tumbling into the open throat of the abyss. The weight of the moment hits him harder than the wind. It's the cold reality that his entire life was just cut in half. High above, the crimson drake continues to tear the sky apart. But Xian is already deep into the dark. Most people run when a monster prepares its final desperate strike. But some men are built differently. Faced with a beam of energy that could level a cavern, this old warrior doesn't blink. He just laughs. Deoden is in his element, asking if there's anything left behind the name of a drake and mocking the shame of a boss that can't even stand its ground. But the monster refuses to die quietly and gathers the last of its strength, while Deoden watches with a wild grin, waiting for the challenge he came for. The beam finally blasts out with enough force to level the cavern, swallowing him in a blinding light. The crimson drake prepares for one final stand, gathering its power into its throat for a blast that will never come, and its roar is cut short as the hunt ends. Deoden spent a full year wandering the desert searching for this dragon, all to take its heart and forge a weapon called Crayon, and now the man gives his prey one final command to die. Deoden didn't just kill the monster, he turned its heart into a weapon. The long wait ends as the steel takes its true shape, drawing the dragon's heart into the blade as the sword Crayon is finally born. Its heat making the carvings pulse while Deoden watches his creation stabilize. It is a weapon of blood and ruin, and he reaches out to claim the hilt and the power he needs to finish what he started. The memory of the struggle is already pulling him under. He's reeling from the terror of being completely outclassed, and as the weight of the encounter finally lands, Xian loses his grip on the present. Xian takes the full force of the impact and hits the ground hard, already wondering how he's still in one piece. He's already congratulating himself for being built different, realizing that every shockwave he took during training actually sharpened his reflexes. Deoden warns that the dungeon is failing, but his grip suggests a darker exit plan. He feels the hand tighten on his collar and realizes this isn't a rescue, just as Deoden laughs. In one motion, the old man flings him straight into a dark portal with a final mocking goodbye. Xian screams in a fit of rage as he gets thrown through the air like trash, his face twisting in shock when the dungeon suddenly turns into a desert. He skitters across the sand, choking on the dust. He spits out a mouthful and tries to find his bearings while Deoden steps through the rift behind him. The old man is completely unbothered. Before Xian can even finish asking why they didn't just walk out, Deoden shuts him down. He points toward the horizon, offering a simple path back to the city where Xian can return to his old life. Or, he can follow a monster and learn what it actually means to be strong. Xian looks up at the man standing over him, struggling to grasp the scale of what's being asked. Deoden offers only the cold truth that this path could take decades. The weight of that timeline leaves the young man frozen. It is a choice between the comfort of the life he knows and a gamble with a 99% chance of death, and the old man is pressing him for the answer right now. Xian finds the choice he's being offered almost too hard to believe, snapping at Deoden to ask if the old man has finally lost his mind, since giving up a home for a scorching desert sounds like a death sentence. With the talking done, our protagonist makes the decision to follow him because he has debts to pay and realizes he's currently too weak to settle them alone. Xian throws a grin at the old man, admitting that Deoden is overwhelmingly stronger than anyone he's ever met. To the boy, this man represents the absolute peak of power, and seeing that ceiling gives him a sudden, sharp clarity. But Xian has found his path. Following this monster is the only way he'll ever become stronger than everyone else. It's a heavy bet, and he's taking it. The warning comes back immediately. That kind of certainty is exactly what leads to a lifetime of regret. Deoden doesn't wait for an answer, barking at his new student to keep up because they have a lot of ground to cover. Out in the heat of the desert, the weight of his choice finally starts to land. Xian has hit his limit after 6 hours of non-stop walking. But Deoden doesn't look back, letting the silence break the boy until he screams at the old man's back. With the heat pushing 50 degrees and every step through the dunes making heat stroke feel guaranteed, Deiden finally calls the boy a fool for failing to use his power to control the very sand that's defeating him. Zeon shouts in desperation. But Deiden isn't impressed and simply asks what that fact is even supposed to change. To Zeon, being an F rank changes everything, but the old man finally snaps, shouting that rank is just idiot nonsense that won't save his life. He demands to know if the boy plans to give up just because he wasn't born a god, and the realization lands hard as Deiden tells him to stop whining and start using his brain. Deiden drops the truth like a hammer. The power belongs to Zeon alone, leaving him with no choice but to figure it out or die. His grip tightens until Zeon's shoulder begins to crack, forcing a frantic promise just to survive. Finally released, the young man braces himself against the shifting dunes. He reaches out with his mind until the desert spikes around him. It's a small start, but stopping the sand from swallowing his ankles might save him enough stamina to make it out alive. Zeon starts testing a new theory, using mana to compress the shifting sand, but the energy cost is too high. He starts focusing the mana into his legs instead, getting so lost in the process that Deiden has to cut in and watch the kid struggle while noting that this persistence is a privilege of youth. To the world, Zeon is just an F-rank hunter. Zeon finally figures out how to make his life in the desert easier. By using mana to control the sand under his feet, walking becomes easy, and he can't help but mock the old man for being too slow to keep up, and slams him into the dirt, while Deiden warns the boy that wasting energy is a fast way to end up dead. But the silence lasts a little too long, and when the kid doesn't move, panic sets in because he has actually stopped breathing. Zeon finally opens his eyes, his head spinning as he tries to figure out exactly where he ended up, but Deiden is already there waiting with a complaint about how much time he's wasted. Our protagonist tries to argue that his whole body is covered in wounds, but he stops when a piece of jerky lands in front of him. Back when being weak didn't mean you were doomed and there was actual honor in protecting people. It's a world that sounds like a fairy tale to Zeon, but Deiden just can't get used to how brutal things have become. Deiden gives him a choice: stay down and die, or pull himself together and get back up, and wonders how many centuries of memories he's gathered. He doesn't know it yet, but this is the last quiet moment he gets before the world starts moving. And Zeon realizes this is how the man teaches, showing him how to survive in a world where he's never even seen a fish. Zeon starts the morning begging for one more moment of rest, but Deiden shuts him down as the boy shivers through the realization that desert nights are much colder than he remembered. He's learning the hard way that the dunes don't care about his comfort. It doesn't help that his mentor spent the entire night talking to a sword. He catches the old man wringing a drink out of his own clothes. This isn't exactly the kind of training he signed up for. Zeon follows his lead and starts wringing his own gear out, realizing that spreading it overnight was a clever trick to harvest dew from the air. He promises himself he'll get his revenge once he gets stronger, but the old man cuts the daydream short with a sharp insult. The kid still has a lot to learn. Zeon leans into his own stupidity just to win an argument, but Deiden kills the joke by asking if he's actually paying attention to his surroundings. Confused at first, the boy looks around until the vibration in the ground becomes hard to ignore, and it's clear they aren't alone anymore. The landscape is crawling with monsters that have already cut off every path of escape. These are great horned hyenas, a nocturnal pack that is even more dangerous in the dawnlight. Deiden asks if the kid can survive this alone, or if he'll need help again just as the monsters lunge forward with a snarl. Zeon laughs off the idea of a rescue, deciding right then that if he's going to make it out of here, he's doing it on his own. He pulls everything he has left into a single gamble that sends a massive eruption of stone through the pack, while he struggles to hold the power steady and the ground turns into a jagged trap. But the relief is short-lived because there are always more, and he's starting to see the true shape of the trap. Zeon is 1 minute away from being eaten alive. He's out of time, out of energy, and surrounded by monsters that won't stop coming. If he doesn't find a way to fight smarter right now, his first dungeon run will be his last, realizing the pack will kill him if his mana runs out first. so he searches for a plan until a sudden lunge forces him to strike back in frustration. The beast manages to tear a hole in his arm, but looking at the damage, he finds a realization waiting for him that could change everything. Zeon faces a wall of teeth as the horned hyenas charge through the dust. They surround him in the middle of the wasteland, with nowhere left to run. He only needs to punch a single opening through their ranks, and a dark grin spreads as his mana sends spikes through the pack to clear his path. Diodon is fully lost in the bloodlust, laughing because a clean hole kills just as well as an exploding head. While the pack closes in, Zeon anchors himself to the one rule that matters. He keeps his strikes tight while watching the master work and seeing that the manic old man is actually taking his time alongside Park Manhwa, who shrugs off a wolf's bite like a joke and insults the beast before he starts the real slaughter, allowing Diodon to draw his blade and finish the rest of the pack. Diodon has officially lost it. Zeon watches in horror as the old man starts that terrifying pattern again, shouting about the massacre until the impact hits like a shockwave, throwing Zeon back. He can only curse the old man's total lack of restraint. The massive scar torn into the ground leaves Jang Yongbum wondering if this is even a human or just a monster who doesn't need skills to break the world. Zeon realizes how thin the line is between survival and a messy end, while Diodon mocks the alpha female for making such a big fuss right until the beast lunges. The massive force field catches the old man off guard, signaling a rank of power neither of them expected. Diodon just stands there, weathering the storm with a calm that doesn't make sense as the boy's brain stalls out trying to process what he's seeing. Diodon mocks the lightning as if it's a massage, until he decides the beast has lived long enough. Zeon realizes it's safer to just ignore how terrifying the old man is, especially when he gets mocked for having the nerve to still be alive. Without warning, the old man tosses him a dagger and tells him the free handouts are over. From now on, the boy is finding his own food. Survival in this desert starts with a lesson on what meat kills you, but Diodon doesn't have time for a slow lecture and yells at Zeon to get moving before the sun pins them down in the open. Surprisingly, the protagonist finds himself humming with a full stomach and a bag full of supplies. Realizing his new sand step skill makes the trek through the dunes feel like a breeze. He even finds the confidence to tease the old man about his age, laughing when he realizes his reflexes are finally catching up enough to dodge a counterstrike. After days in the sun, finding water isn't just lucky, it's the difference between life and death. Diodon has officially had enough of his partner's attitude, while Zeon isn't having a great time either, spitting out sand after having his face shoved into the dirt. He tries to play it off as a joke, but then the air shifts and brings a hint of moisture he didn't expect. He wonders if his mind is finally playing tricks until he sees Diodon staring at the same spot. If the old man is looking, then it has to be real. The desert heat had been a slow death, but cresting the next dune changes everything for Zeon, who can't believe his eyes as he stares down at an oasis he thought was just a legend. Without a second thought, the kid starts a frantic sprint down the sand, and he doesn't stop until he finally plunges into the water to wash away the dust. Zeon finally hits the water, and the relief is so thick he can practically taste it. Letting the cool liquid wash away the heat, a bright light appears in the dark, dragging him into a sudden drowsiness until a voice screams for him to wake up. Diodon is already charging across the dunes to find Zeon dazed and barely conscious at the water's edge. Zeon stands right at the edge of the coast, unaware that something ancient is watching from the depths while a predator shifts below. Gliding through the dark water, just as the water breaks, Diodon lunges forward and grabs the boy. The monster erupts from the waves as Diodon throws the kid back, and Zeon hits the sand hard, looking up to see his mentor turning to face a nightmare that shouldn't exist. Diodon tightens his grip and launches himself at the massive creature as it bursts from the waves, leaving Zeon frozen by the sight of the glowing arc above the beast, the legendary rainbow lure he'd only ever heard about, and apparently, the full gorge uses that light to draw prey straight into its mouth. Diodon keeps his focus steady as he strikes Zeon back to clear the kill zone, sending the boy into the sand. As the lecture turns into a harsh reminder that adapting to this world doesn't make him a master yet. This one lesson might be the only thing keeping him alive tonight. Survival in a desert doesn't leave much room for error. Deoden isn't interested in being a patient teacher, and he orders Zeon to skin the beast they just killed because its belly provides the perfect material for a robe. It's a simple lesson in scavenging, but when the boy asks if his mentor is the one who needs the coat, the man snaps and screams until the desert air vibrates. Our hero can only sob out an apology while his ears ring. Deoden casually tells the boy to take a good look at the creature, but Zeon can only stare in disbelief because something this massive shouldn't be called a fish. It's a realization that shatters his understanding of how scary the world really is. He drives his blade into the hide with everything he has, but it doesn't leave a mark, giving his mentor room to mock him for giving the beast a back rub. The mockery sends the boy into a shouting fit of frustration. Muscles alone aren't enough to carve through hide this thick. He pauses to search for the mana he's been told is inside him. He focuses his mind until his energy begins to flow, giving the knife the edge it needs to finally bite deep. Zeon realizes he can't just hack away. He needs precision, thinning out the scales until they're sharp enough to act as needles. If the scales are his tools, the tendons will be his thread. And for a moment, he thinks he has finally cracked the secret to master-level crafting. Deoden isn't ready to call it a night, eyeing the remaining materials and demanding one more round of work under the desert sky, having survived 8 failures to finally craft a cloak he's proud of. That pride turns to instant panic when the old man speaks up, sending the kid into a scramble to protect his work. But Deoden just shuts down the nonsense and hands over a fresh prize he expects the boy to eat. Deoden presents the prize, a sandworm's gallbladder that he claims is a rare medicine Zeon must finish, to the last gram. Apparently, the choice is simple: eat it all or die. Zeon takes the massive weight, wishing the old man's arm would just drop already, and braces for the first bite. Then, the feeling shifts. The organ suddenly feels light as a cloud in his mouth, making it easy to shovel the whole thing in without feeling full until Deoden snaps him back to reality. This isn't just some external flame. Our protagonist can feel his entire body cooking from the center out as his mana completely spirals, feeling like the sun itself is twisting inside his stomach. While he loses himself to the agony, Deoden just watches and tells him to endure it, because to the master, everything in this world is as temporary as the oasis they're standing in. Deoden speaks of the way life moves in circles, observing how even the sandworm returns while Zeon suffers through a pain that the old man doesn't care to help with, letting the boy's threats fall on deaf ears. When Zeon wakes to the sound of the ocean, he realizes his nightmare is still standing over him. Zeon snaps awake to find the old man leaning over him and screams in panic until Deoden chuckles and asks if he slept well, though our boy says passing out isn't exactly a nap. When the old man asks how his body feels, the usual answer dies in his throat. Something is completely different. His body feels light as sand, his muscles have tightened like wires, and his mana is swirling inside him like a storm. This is the moment his power finally breaks through. Our protagonist isn't just recovered. He's been rebuilt from the inside out. He stands up and looks at his hands, wondering how he could have grown this much in a single night, while Deoden explains it's all thanks to the sandworm's gallbladder. Deoden explains the value of their meal, noting the rare gallbladder medicine is the only way to survive this sun, and the realization hits Zeon hard. He can't understand why the old man would give up something so rare just to help him. Deoden brushes the thanks off with a sharp insult and tells the kid to start making himself useful. They stay by the bones for 4 days to eat their fill. Zeon is back on his feet instantly, filled with new energy and a desperate need to prove he can pull his own weight. 2 weeks in a sandstorm is enough to break anyone's spirit. Our protagonist is more worried about the man leading him into the middle of nowhere. The desert has turned into a wall of sand and wind that Zeon moves through like it's a clear day, as his new abilities turn the lethal storm into a light breeze while he follows the old man out in front. Deoden hasn't spoken a single word for days, and after 2 weeks of non-stop travel, Zeon is starting to wonder if they're actually lost right as the sand shifts to reveal a massive ant monster. It's a sudden violent change of pace. Whatever they were looking for out here, they found a predator instead. Zeon drops the first creature with a quick strike to silence its noise, but the heat and the sound of Deidan's failing health are clearly starting to wear on him. Until a sudden shift in the sand catches his attention and shows that his target is much tougher than he gave it credit for. He was hoping to slip through the desert without a fight, but the map reveals he's walked into a full-blown ambush. So, our protagonist braces himself and invites the swarm to come out before the old man loses his patience, while the creatures close in from every side. Zeon hunkers down against the desert wind, earning a rare bit of praise for his focus, and then the ground starts to explode into massive columns of grit. Deidan actually seems to enjoy the heat, even as the storm gets worse. Then the realization lands. The old man is gone. Zeon is alone. He screams into the wind, calling his teacher a lonely man with no friends, while a giant ant creeps up behind him, but the apology comes too late once the desert begins to swallow him whole. He thought he was in control, but as the sand begins to move, Zeon realizes he's just the bait. Zeon realizes his mistake the second the sound lands, and even though his detection range usually covers every monster within 10 meters, the feeling creeping up his spine right now is different from anything he's tracked before, because it isn't just a threat, it's pure instinctual terror. The sand suddenly erupts as a massive swarm of dark-shelled ants surges out of the dunes, their red eyes glowing as they flood the landscape in an army so large he can't even guess where they all came from, leaving him with nothing to do but scream for his grandfather before the swarm swallows them both. While Deidan watches from the desert sands, and as the giant ants close in, he realizes his grandfather must have sensed them long ago. This isn't an accident, it's a trial, a quest meant to see if he can finally survive on his own. The panic disappears, replaced by a wild grin as he decides that even 10,000 bugs are still just bugs, and he launches forward. Diving into the nest, Zeon realizes he messed up the second the ground starts moving, burying him under a mountain of giant ants until the weight finally pins him down. Our hero finds just enough space to kick off and launch himself high above the sand to look down at the massive ant tunnel carved deep into the desert. He figures he's safe as long as he stays in the air since these creatures aren't built for flight, right until something slams into him. The impact knocks the wind out of him before he can even finish the thought. Zeon clings to a sharp rock ledge, his eyes wide with a shock that borders on panic. He tries to convince himself this isn't happening, telling himself that this has to be a lie. There is simply no way he's going to die in a dark hole like this, not while the screeches of a giant ant cuts his thoughts short and sends him falling straight toward the tunnel floor. He hits the sand hard, and the impact knocks the wind out of his lungs. Blood sprays from his mouth as Zeon struggles to his hands and knees. Zeon calls out for his grandfather, the only anchor he has left in this wasteland. But the panic doesn't swallow him as something deep inside finally breaks. Deidan watches the boys change with a grim sense of pride. Zeon has a gift that could have bought him a safe life in this desert world. To Deidan, the world is a landscape of disgust where everyone chases ghosts instead of facing the truth of why everything fell apart. He believes true power must be built through individual struggle, not a factory system that turns warriors into mass-produced tools. Deidan still can't forget the tragedy from a century ago, back when the world fell apart and everything he knew started to burn. He remembers the total weight of that helplessness, seeing everyone from his neighbors to his own family die right before his eyes. The memory of his daughter is the hardest part, the final proof that he couldn't protect a single thing he loved, but he sees something different in Zeon as the boy fights back against the swarm. Deidan knows the boy has the possibility to become anything, and he smiles because crossing the line between life and death is the only way to build a real monster. The results are immediate, showing in the way Zeon reaches a new state of power and laughs because he knows the creatures in front of him are finished. The giant ants keep coming, unaware that the threat has already passed them by. Zeon pulls the desert into a single point to form a sand missile and lets it fly, making the world very small for everything in his path. That erupts with 10 times his usual power, fueled by the sudden rush of knowing his plan actually worked. He taunts the monsters for failing to kill him while they had the chance. Zeon stands alone in the wreckage, surveying the massive craters he just carved into the desert sand, until he finally clenches his fist to savor the win. Zeon roars a promise to his grandfather to wipe them all out. As the pain sets in, the shape of the trap becomes clear. This isn't a skill, it's mana-blocking poison. And our boy explodes into a blind rage at the insult of being trapped while his struggle only makes the monster's grip tighter. Zeon wakes up in the dark, staring up at a nightmare of crawling walls, where he realizes he's been dragged into an ant nest as grub-like larvae wriggle through the dirt toward him, their screeching filling the tunnel as the nearest one sinks its sharp teeth into his shoulder. He can't even move a finger to fight back, forced to watch as he's eaten alive while the world starts to blur, surrounded by creatures waiting for their next meal. That stops the monsters and lets out a wild, broken laugh from the bottom of the pit. Not even a single good memory is flashing before his eyes. That unfairness is the only thing keeping him breathing as he spits one last insult, which ignites the air and levels the entire chamber. The creature puts its entire weight into a strike meant to kill, turning the chamber floor into a spray of jagged stone that leaves Zeon reeling as he struggles to get his lungs working, knowing another hit like that will end him. Zeon finally ranks up, feeling a level of power he never thought possible. But as he looks at the monster in front of him, he realizes his new strength might not be enough. The beast is untouched, and it's about to bring the entire cliff down on his head. Zeon realizes he's finally crossed the threshold, ranking up as the stigma vanishes and a surge of energy replaces the exhaustion that had been dragging him down. Looking at the markings on his skin, he wonders if he's actually evolved, knowing the gap between this and his old F-rank life is massive. But the power jump doesn't change the nightmare standing in front of him, where he stares at the massive ant and realizes his best efforts haven't even left a mark. The beast is completely untouched. It doesn't just attack, it tears through the cliffside. The creature takes everything Zeon throws at it, and doesn't even flinch, leaving him on the ground and struggling to grasp how his best strikes didn't even leave a scratch, when no matter how hard he pushes, he isn't even marking the shell. Our protagonist forces himself to find another way. If the armor can't be broken, he has to stop trying to break it. Shifting his focus from piercing the shell to tearing the beast apart, deciding that if the shell won't shatter, he'll just twist the whole thing and rip it right off the creature's body. And though Zeon tries to hold his ground, the force is enough to leave him rattled. Blood spills from his eyes as he realizes the high-frequency vibration is about to make everything explode. And even as a shockwave rips through the air and reveals the beast's hidden trump card, Zeon only tightens his grip to meet the threat head-on, daring the world to see which of them breaks first as he screams for a fight to the death. But the drive snaps the second his heart fails, blurring his vision and forcing the realization that he hit his absolute limit miles ago. Now, he is left to curse the weakness of his body while the giant worm's shadow falls over him. Deoden stands over the broken boy, warning him that lying around on the ground will only lead to more pain. Even through the blood, our protagonist can only offer a weak smile at the sight of his grandpa. He tries to joke about leaving the final blow for his savior, which earns him another scolding for being a rude little runt. To the old man, fighting a C-rank queen ant proved the kid finally earned his right to survive, but the praise falls on deaf ears as Zeon just smiles through the days and starts dragging him away before he can even ask where they're going. Deoden leads the boy deeper into the cave until they find a strange glowing orb sitting among the ruins. Zeon isn't sure what he's seeing, so he turns to his grandfather for a straight answer. The old man tells him to eat the egg, treating the dangerous prize like it's just a strawberry-flavored treat. Zeon stares at the instructions carved into the floor, wondering if the old man is actually serious about him eating the glowing orb sitting in the dirt. He tries to check if he'll get sick like last time, but since his hearing is shot, he misses the blunt warning that this medicine might actually kill him. Imagining the strawberry flavor he's heard about but never actually tasted, Zeon feels a strange new feeling creeping up on him. It quickly turns into white-hot pain, making him choke as he looks at his grandfather in shock. The queen ant's egg is twisting his organs until they pierce through his skin like sharp thorns. He screams, demanding to know what he was just fed. Deiden isn't being kind, telling the young man to get used to the suffering if he wants to survive this crazy world. Zeon can't even find the words to argue as he fights to keep his own body from turning itself inside out. Zeon hits the ground, his lungs burning as he coughs up blood and stares at his hands, watching the dark liquid pool in his palms while realizing this was the moment everything was supposed to change. For a second, he actually thought he'd found someone he could trust, someone who felt like family. But the realization lands with a bitter sting. He was just a fool for ever calling the man grandpa, while Deiden moves on without a backward glance, simply turning toward his next target, as if the boy never existed. Reaching deep into the monster's body, pulling out a mana stone that puts anything from the mines to shame. It's a massive jackpot, and since the rest of the ant is useful, he starts packing it up until a noise catches his ear, and he answers an unseen friend with a cold truth about the boy left behind. Zeon lies nearby, pinned by red crystalline spikes, but the old man simply turns his back on his companion to disappear into the dark, dismissing the youth's fate as the natural order for the weak. Deiden knows the situation is sliding sideways, but Zeon can barely feel the ground beneath him. He doesn't even understand why he's still alive. Deiden isn't interested in letting him recover, leaning in with a mock greeting to see if there's any life left in the kid. He studies the boy for a second, watching as Zeon pulls himself up and calls on everything he has left. Deiden just calls him a fool for trying to keep the fight going. Deiden has finally reached his limit with the struggle. He is out of patience and orders Zeon to just quit before things get even worse. Zeon tumbles backward as the ground turns against him, asking why someone he trusted would try to kill him until the question tears out of him in a scream. The betrayal finally clicks into place, and as the grief burns away to leave nothing but white-hot rage, he reaches out a hand and promises there will be no forgiveness, shattering heavy slabs of rock into the air, while his full power finally tears through the last of his restraint. The adrenaline finally burns off, leaving Zeon struggling for air as he tries to ask why his mentor would try to kill him, but Deiden shuts the thought down instantly and notes that it is hard to think when toxins are messing with the brain, especially since the old man could have finished him with a flick of a finger if he actually wanted a corpse. The egg was actually a method to flush every impurity from his body and fill the void with raw power, and the sensation is unmistakable now as he confirms his mana capacity has tripled. Even when ordered to let go, our hero doubles down. Our protagonist breathes a secret sigh of relief over his solid save, even as the old man admits the test was nearly lethal. This was never about a bond. It was a cold gamble on a piece of trash that only stays useful as long as he gets stronger. Deiden isn't one for quiet exits, and he's already decided it's time to head out, and that a certain grin tells the whole story, leaving our hero to just brace himself as the truth lands. Out in the desert, a few small scorpions pick through the sand in peace until the ground explodes when Deiden kicks off. He tears across the dunes at an insane pace, while Zeon screams a desperate cry to just travel like a normal person for once. Deiden isn't interested in making excuses. He reminds the kid that sleeping for 4 days straight is why he's struggling now as his eyes lock onto the horizon, until he looks up at a monster that defies logic. A mountain of flesh and stone. Deiden calls it Archelon, a mobile fortress that never allows for a moment of peace, explaining that humans use the modified shells of these B-rank beasts as living transport. Zeon thought he knew the limits of the world, but staring up at that mountain of stone changes everything. The idea of anyone taming a monster that size seems like a bad joke. And as the scale of it all starts sinking in, Deiden hammers home a lesson about true power. A figure leaps from the giant beast and lands with enough force to shake the sand, and when a voice from the distance knows the old man right away, Deiden knows he is in trouble. He warns the kid to stay back while he prepares to face someone from his past. After all these years, a face from the past finally reappears. The recognition lands with the weight of a lifetime, and the old man waits in the wasteland to finally call out to Diadon. Pavilsa doesn't waste a second before mocking his old rival, laughing about how many teeth the man has left since they last met. Diadon just sighs in response to the noise. The old man notes that most people past 100 aren't nearly this active while our guy Zeon watches the two legends from the middle. Pavilsa asks why Diodon is in this area, and when he hears it's because of scavengers, he mocks the man for running away from weak monsters. Diodon just dismisses the insult and calls his caution wisdom. Zeon wonders how these grandpas are still so strong when age should have caught up years ago. Done with the chatter, Diodon whistles for his massive sand beast to move them along. The scale of the place finally sinks in, and Zeon is stunned by the size of the beast they're riding until Pavilsa signals that it's time to move. Zeon tries to keep a low profile. An old man with white hair soon notices him and asks if the boy belongs to Pavilsa. The warrior just hoists Zeon up like a bag of laundry and jokes about picking up local trash. To the old man watching from above, Pavilsa's sudden return feels like a sign that the world is finally coming to an end. Zeon can barely process the scale of the interior as they stumble onto an entire city hidden away inside the massive stone walls. Pavilsa identifies the locals as the Mort clan, though Zeon struggles to believe an entire town could truly be one family. They are all direct descendants of the clan's founder, but Pavilsa sees them as a group of fools who are entirely dependent on the fortress to stay alive. The old man bristles at the insult, warning Pavilsa to watch what he says about his people. Of course, Pavilsa doubles down, shouting that the clan members are just parasites, that the Archelon will discard the moment their leader finally dies. The traveler shuts down the argument, pushing the talk to a later time as he brings his feet down and asks to see the goods first. Diodon opens a dark portal in his palm, letting a mountain of spoils spill across the table, while Zeon wonders how many lives it took to gather this much. Even after being told he'll join the pile soon, Zeon asks if magic is involved, but Diodon isn't about to be helpful just because a kid is yelling. Things only calm down once the loot is brought to an appraiser, who finds the quality flawless enough for the old man to cut the flattery and get to business. When the appraiser tries to joke about paying in mana stones, he sees the old man's hand move toward his hilt and naturally realizes it's time to get serious, asking what his client is actually looking for instead of wasting any more time. Diodon isn't looking for cash. He wants a breastplate made from wolf ant queen remains, and finishes the demand by asking for a subspace tool as an exhausted Zeon watches from the side. The old man with the monocle is confused, because Diodon already has the best gear and plenty of storage. Diodon doesn't bother with an explanation, pulling Zeon forward and forcing the old man to realize that the boy must be useful enough to justify this kind of care. He stops questioning and shouts for an assistant named Kaylee, as the sound of approaching footsteps pulls Zeon's attention toward the doorway. Zeon is completely floored by the girl who just walked into the room, a young enchanter named Kaylee. Her grandfather skips the greeting to ask about a subspace bracelet she once made, and while she explains the project actually became a gauntlet with a perfect enchantment, her heart drops when he orders her to hand that treasure over to Zeon. This is her pride and joy, and now she's supposed to just give it to a stranger. Pavilsa watches the girl's meltdown and laughs. It's clear the child he remembers hasn't lost any of her fire. Pavilsa beams at his granddaughter, praising her talent for enchanting as a rarity even in Neo Soul. Kaylee gives a reluctant nod while the associate ushers her out, and naturally, our protagonist follows along for that gauntlet. As the pair begins walking through the settlement streets, Kaylee eventually breaks the silence to ask about the old man. Kaylee is horrified by the news, unable to grasp how Zeon is still breathing while being dragged around by a man like that. In that moment of panic, the truth of the situation finally lands. They share the exact same trauma, a deep-seated fear of a man who kills beasts with his bare hands for the taste. She warns him that his master is just a monster under a human face, but the mood flips when they reach a massive stone door where Kaylee reveals her private workshop, telling him not to be too shocked by a sight that pulls the air right out of his lungs. Zeon steps into the workshop, and the scale of the place hits him instantly. He can't believe the room is filled with custom gear, while Kaylee proudly claims every single piece is a masterpiece she built herself. She's clearly obsessed with her craft, gushing over a gauntlet that blends a starfish frame with pure adamantium. The idea of a gauntlet that fixes itself catches Zeon's attention. Kaylee is more focused on the fire attribute, promising that the right pairing will turn him into a total monster. Our hero wonders if he should even take something this valuable, but Kaylee brushes the concern aside as a direct request from her grandfather. She adds, one final catch: whatever he puts in the gauntlet stays there forever. Zeon starts to offer his thanks, but the moment is cut short as Kaylee suddenly grabs hold of him. Zeon and Kaylee start a tug-of-war over a mechanical part, turning a simple handover into a dramatic scene where she refuses to give her creation to a nobody. Our MC only laughs as he finally yanks the gear away. The game ends instantly as Zeon wonders if he actually upset her. She identifies the noise as a specific cry and warns that they've arrived, leaving Zeon desperate to find out who she means. Out in the desert, a massive cloud of dust signals the arrival of a group that never knows when to quit. Kaylee feels the vibration first, bracing herself as the sound of heavy hoofbeats begins to rattle the fortress. While the man beside him looks on with worry, Diodon doesn't even bother to stand, clearly annoyed by the sudden interruption. He recognizes the threat instantly. These enemies have been on their trail for a long time, and he's clearly sick of how they refuse to stay gone. The scavengers have finally arrived, charging across the dunes on horseback alongside their massive predatory cats. Zeon realizes they aren't alone. Scavengers are closing in, and Kaylee confirms the threat as they sprint deeper into the ruin, warning him that these groups have been growing in number lately, who don't just stop at simple looting. Apparently, they treat murder like a sport. As they reach the massive interior gates, Zeon still doesn't grasp the danger, questioning why a low-tier rank would have her this rattled. Kaylee bursts into the room with Zeon right behind her, shouting for her grandfather as the pressure of the chase finally breaks. Inside the chamber, she finds the Elder and a lounging Diodon waiting for the news. She suggests using the power of the Archelon fortress to stop them, but the Elder knows the enemy will catch up anyway and decides a direct fight is the only way forward. Kaylee stands there frozen in confusion, while the warrior casually finishes his drink. He barks out a loud insult for backup, and Zeon responds with a salute that proves he is exactly as dense as everyone thinks. Diodon decides he's done enough work and tells Zeon to handle the rest, claiming the kid needs to pay him back for the treasure by taking down a D-ranker alone. Zeon waits for a real answer, but the old man only asks if he's scared, an insult that lands with enough weight to send him walking straight into the heart of the storm. He curses his own temper the entire way, realizing he just fell for a cheap trick from a man who knows exactly how to push his buttons. Zeon forces himself to breathe, trying to push back the panic because time is the one thing he doesn't have. He needs a clear head since he only has 5 minutes before the next wave hits, and with the threat already closing in, he weighs the fact that he's facing an Awakener whose rank makes the whole fight look impossible. Nearby, Diodon stands his ground as his companion asks if they're really sure about this move. Pavilsa watches the lone boy below and questions why they are leaving an E-rank hunter on his own. But Diodon doesn't offer comfort, only a cold reminder that in this world, losing means dying. Pavilsa knows his partner is extreme, noting that even a tiger cub is weak before it grows up. Yet he still sees a spark in Zeon and wonders what happens if the kid finally bares his fangs, and calls out one final command for him to keep in mind that lands with a weight Zeon hasn't felt before. It takes a second for the message to sink in. He braces himself now with a fresh sense of grit. Whatever comes next, he's finished being the victim. The scavengers finally catch up to their prey and ask Gawain if they should spare the useful ones for the slave markets. But he shuts down the idea of mercy immediately. He orders them torn apart. He leads the charge himself to show off his power, with his crew following him into the dust for a slaughter they think is going to be easy. But a sudden strike hits their line and throws Gawain from his mount as the terror of what is standing over him finally hits home. The desert floor splits apart without warning, sending the scavengers into a frantic retreat. Gawain struggles to keep his footing in the shifting sand, asking Klain if they've walked into a hidden trap. She is just as confused as he is. The chaos provides the perfect opening for the protagonist to close the gap and snatch Klain from behind. She freezes in terror, unable to process how he could move so fast. Gowon screams for the boy to release her, but Zeon follows through with a ruthless strike. A spray of blood hits Gowon square in the eyes, leaving him frozen as the weight of the moment lands. Before stepping over the wreckage to call for his next target with a cold, flat command, Gowon launches a desperate counterattack, swinging his blade with everything he has left in a strike that hits with enough force to level the ground. But his confusion turns to terror when he realizes Zeon didn't just dodge, he blocked the massive blade clean. Everything Gowon knew about power just died. Gowon screams for his backup, signaling the scavenger to end the standoff, and Mashimoto answers by dropping from the heights to catch Zeon in a blind spot with a strike meant to finish the job. Gowon is already losing his calm, his frustration boiling over at the constant stalls. He lashes out with a desperate surge of power, only to stop cold when he realizes he's striking nothing but shifting sand. It's another distraction he doesn't have the patience for, and he throws a wild punch forward with enough force to shatter whatever illusion is standing in his way. As the kid closes in, but Deiden interrupts to warn him that the weight of killing will be a problem unless he realizes these scavengers aren't human. Zeon can't grasp the claim, but the old man lists their crimes until mercy is gone. This is how monsters are made. A heavy boot sinks into a pool of blood, and Zeon looks at the mess to ask if this is really the best they can do as humans, which sends Gowon into a murderous spiral. He launches a volley of projectiles into the air, but watches as Zeon stays perfectly still, sending the man flying backward while he screams more insults into the dust. The threats turn into a list of torture involving severed fingers, until the rant finally hits a wall and Zeon asks if those are his last words. Gowon is at his limit, the weight of the betrayal finally burning through his calm, while Pavilsa watches the fallout with the grin of a man who's found his favorite show. The air in the desert shifts the second Zeon's grip locks onto his blade. He dismisses the man as a piece of trash and prepares to end a fight that should have been over years ago. This is the part where it gets ugly, of Klain and Mashimoto, and now he stares into the storm, wondering exactly what kind of power he's facing. It's a force that takes the shape of a massive sand dragon, turning the desert into a graveyard before he can even move, and his silence screams with murderous intent. Gowon has had enough of the tricks, demanding to see the true strength Zeon has been hiding as the boy weaves through a storm of spikes. But the masked warrior isn't interested in games anymore before he finally finds our protagonist and pins him to the dirt, warning him that in a real fight, a single mistake is all it takes to end everything. One mistake out here is all it takes to lose everything. Zeon realizes too late that he's been baited into a trap, while Gowon warns him that being careless is a death sentence. Looking him dead in the eye, the man makes it clear that this beating is personal, a debt he's paying back for Mashimoto. He pours his entire weight into a single blow that erupts in a massive shockwave, shattering the earth right where Zeon stood. But our protagonist pulls a desperate move at the last possible second, ditching his own gauntlet to slip the grip and scramble for safety. Mashimoto curses his own stupidity for letting the boy get away as the kid disappears into the shifting sand, and he beats himself up for losing his cool. He soon notices his wound is much weaker than it should be, which confirms the gauntlet was the source of that power. He realizes it's a rare wind-type magic that uses sand to add force to every hit. With the secret finally out, he lunges back into the chase, because he knows exactly how to handle these methods now. The kid is finally in reach. Zeon didn't just survive the strike, he turned the whole world into his weapon. Gowon moves in for the kill, certain that Zeon is finished now that he's lost his gauntlet and his ability to channel power, but Zeon is just watching the reflection in his eye and waiting for the exact moment his counter can finally land. The earth itself rises up in a massive wave of sand that swallows the battlefield, leaving the old man on the sidelines in shock as he realizes the boy has turned the whole world into his weapon and his shield. Gowon is a scavenger with a lot of combat experience, making any head-on fight a suicide mission. The boy knew his power was strange, and used that to lower his enemy's guard while he waited for a chance to strike. That level of battle judgment usually takes a lifetime to learn, yet the kid just has it naturally. Zeon struggles to catch his breath as the adrenaline fades, knowing that if one hit had landed differently, his story would have ended right here. Even after nearly dying, he manages a weak grin and hopes his performance was enough to finally earn some credit. But the silence is cut short by a heavy vibration that rattles the walls of the massive desert trench. A familiar voice hits like a whip as Pavilsa screams from across the divide, calling Zeon a half-wit for having the nerve to come back after such a reckless fight. Zeon shouts after Deiden, demanding to know what he did wrong to deserve this kind of cold shoulder. But the reason finally drops. It was the thief he decided to spare. The realization hits him hard. He thought he was being kind, but he didn't even notice the danger he brought on himself. Deoden wonders how his student could have missed something so obvious as a man reaching for a weapon to stab him in the back. And while Zeon tries to explain, his mentor has heard enough and orders him home before walking off into the desert. Deiden gives a final, cold warning, telling our hero that his attitude will get him killed, while the old man nearby follows the exchange with a sharp eye and the girl feels the distance between them starting to grow. Zeon's hand tightens as he prepares to leave, offering one last chance to walk away and begging them to go back before the path forward closes. But as the desert wind kicks up, he finally lets the silence settle and turns his back on them for good. Zeon keeps his response short, but the elder explains that his people aren't built for this kind of violence. They are just blacksmiths who only know how to swing heavy tools at scavengers, meaning they would have been killed if Zeon hadn't arrived to save them. Zeon processes the praise as it lands before Kaylee jumps in to celebrate his solo win against the Black Shark Gang. She tells him not to let the elder's judgment get him down, since the man has always had high standards, but it isn't the praise that has Zeon's attention. He finds himself thinking back to the first time he forged a dagger as a child. He cuts the memory off before it can truly settle. He isn't ready for that part of his story to come back yet. Zeon looks back at the moment he let Mashimoto live and admits he was just hoping the man would simply vanish so he wouldn't have to kill him. Looking at the faces of those who have crossed him, our MC understands they are truly evil, but realizes he didn't have the courage to pull the trigger himself. It was a cowardly choice driven by fear, and looking at the elder now, he realizes the man is right about how this world works. Gramps has likely watched countless people die because they were too soft, and this harsh lesson was actually a form of kindness meant to keep Zeon from ending up dead in the sand. Zeon tries to defend the old man's harsh attitude, claiming he's just bad at showing how he really feels. The words leave his friends stunned. The monocle man admits he's never heard anyone describe the elder that way, while Kaylee wonders if the kid hit his head too hard. He thinks back on how Zeon held back even when his life was in danger. It's a lot for a boy his age to handle, and Kaylee checks him over to make sure he's okay. A mix of relief and guilt settles in, the feeling of being a useless adult while a child carries the weight of their mistakes. He pushes the heavy thoughts away and calls for everyone to head inside to eat. Back inside, Deiden looks up from his book as a knock sounds at the door. Inside his quarters, Deoden listens to the frantic knocking. Zeon finally kicks the door open, demanding to know why the old man is ignoring him. Deoden doesn't even look up from his book, asking the boy if he's finally ready to pack his bags and go home. Zeon isn't having it, insisting he isn't some weakling who is going to break just because things got rough. But his bravado starts to slip the moment the room goes quiet. Deiden points out the one thing Zeon can't hide. His hands are still shaking. The old man finally levels with him, admitting that being okay after what just happened would actually be a sign of madness. Taking a life is a burden that stays with a person forever. He doesn't know it yet, but this is a weight that never truly goes away. Deoden knows the weight of taking a life and warns Zeon that numbing the pain is the first step toward losing himself, because a man with no guilt is no better than the monsters he's supposed to be hunting. That pain is the only proof he's still human, but if the burden is too heavy, the old man offers a way out that Zeon immediately rejects with a slammed fist. He promises to guard his own life, but mostly, he refuses to let a stubborn old man face the world alone. Deiden takes a moment to sit with the boy's stubborn words before finally calling our protagonist an insolent brat. Zeon only leans into it, telling the old man to be honest about how lonely he'd be, even joking about his funeral until Deiden begs the kid to use his words instead of his fists. The shouting eventually fades into the rhythmic clashes of the forge, where the blacksmiths hammer a massive spearhead into shape, while Kaylee focuses on the finer details, carefully enchanting the smaller blades. In the heart of the mobile fortress, the forge is screaming, and Kaylee is stunned to see so many master smiths gathered for a single weapon. Her mentor explains they're simply tempering the spirit of Deorden's sword. Even so, she can't understand how the blade the old man calls crayon, a masterpiece born from one man's obsession, can put out this much power for days on end. Kaylee stands back as the impossible nature of the work finally hits her, realizing the steel holds hundreds of thousands of cores and the souls of beasts. This is more than a weapon, it's a level of power that shouldn't exist in human hands. The blade pours out a heat so intense it feels more like a living pulse than simple metal, leading Kaylee to wonder if a human was even able to forge such a thing until her master drops the name Crayon. It's the ultimate mark of a masterpiece when the weapon and its maker share a title. But before she can even ask about the legend, the master cuts her off with his own name, Kaylee. This is his story now, but he isn't interested in dwelling on the past. He shifts the conversation to the news that Zeon is already preparing to leave, knowing the mercenaries of Deorden never stay in one spot for long. The master returns to find the floor torn up and Zeon out cold, and while he demands a real explanation, Deiden casually claims he was only teaching the boy a lesson. The master isn't buying it. He's clearly had enough of these excuses for one day.